Welcome to ServiceSharp. This is a podcast all about ServiceNow. We'll be talking strategy, architecture, technology, and everything ServiceNow. This podcast is not affiliated with ServiceNow. The opinions expressed are our own. We're just people that are very passionate about the platform. Join us for every episode.
Hi, this is Jason Gibson. Joining me today is Brent Peters and Randy Haas. We are currently going to be talking about why do you need an architect? So this will be a great episode of ServiceSharp. So I'll get it started. Brent, why do you need an architect?
Oh, so I'm getting it started.
Throw him in the deep end.
I'm going to throw you into the deep water, and then we'll pull you back out.
Okay, that works. An architect could be, well, it's several things, but an architect really is the person that's going to know, about the system and what should work and shouldn't work and that kind of stuff. I don't know the official definition, but it is someone that is going to know the system front and back, or know most of the system front and back, and know, how it works.
And, when I think of an architect, and this is what was hard for me, is an architect is not as concerned about the minutia of a lot of things. The architect is concerned about the stability of the platform. They're concerned about how is it done and how is it done correctly. It's not just about how to get it done, but how to get it done right. So I think that's where we really thrive, is when people bring us ideas, we pick them apart and we say, okay, this is the best way to do this. And a lot of times are telling people no.
But usually it's a no. It's usually a no, but with a caveat. No, we shouldn't be doing it that way. Maybe we should look at doing it the correct way, or the best way that fits into ServiceNow, or any application that they're an architect over. But in our case, ServiceNow is what we're talking about. Yeah. So, yeah. And like you said, they should be focused on what's best for the application and what's best for the company that the application is working for. So
it kind of has a holistic view of, what the system is capable of doing and what the business wants to achieve and how that matches with what the current strategy is. I always go back to like the building, building a building. You have the blueprints of the building designed by an architect for a reason, because there's a lot of things that are possible when you're building a building, but there's not a lot of things that are practical or functional when you're building a building. You can put turrets on any building, but there's no point for most buildings,
right?
To do that. You can add a freight elevator to a 2-story home. But you don't necessarily need a freight elevator in a 2-story home. You know what I mean? So and a lot of times, like, those sound outlandish, but some of the times you get requests for dev in the tool, and it's like, that's the equivalent of,
whoa.
A jet engine,
Randy,
a skateboard.
I wanted that. I want that lift.
Yeah, I understand.
But I want it,
especially
right?
when you're moving.
But
especially when you're moving in and out, that's nice to have that lift. But
I'm just saying. But it's me. I'm the one asking, right? But it's nobody else. It's not anybody else. It's me. Right. I'm more important. You got to do what I ask, right?
But that's not how applications work.
Right. Well, it's kind of like, going back to the building example, if you're renovating a house, when you look at a wall and you're like, oh, I don't want that wall there, I can knock that wall out. Sure, you can, but you better check to see if it's load bearing first.
Right.
And if you don't, we get a lot of the equivalent requests for, let's knock this load bearing wall out. And I don't care if the people on the second floor fall through, as long as I get my view. And you get, so sometimes you get requests that are like that.
Right. Yeah. Being asked, okay, I want instant management, but I don't want the out of the box instant management. I want my own custom I want everything in it changed. That kind of stuff is what an architect should sit back and say, wait a minute, hold the horses there.
Well, and I know that a lot of people don't have the experience with older platforms. So if you have to understand where an architect's coming from. Brent and I both have worked on some older instances where it has been highly customized over the years. John wanted this, Bill wanted that, Sally wanted this. And now there's 400 fields. It's just completely customized. There's 400 business rules, 12,000 script includes. And you're saying to yourself, it's not manageable anymore. And it starts, and what happens is it starts breaking. Not only are upgrades unmanageable, but it starts breaking. And so we've been thrown into the mix and went, go straighten that out. And so it gives us a different perspective to go, yeah, I know you want that, but why do you want that? Like, that seems to be the answer the architect keeps asking. Why? I know that, but why? Why are you tracking something? Is there something that piece of data gives you? You know, what is it that is so important that requires that on every incident? And if there's a business reason, I'm all for a lot of that. Mm-hmm. But I've that if pretty often you give that question and they're like, well, because I want it.
Right. Or there's the I want it, or 1 out of 100 we might need that data. Well, 1 out of 100 is not always a good thing for the analyst to be filling out if you're not going to use it. I think right. At least 60 to 70% of the time.
Well, and I see that insane amount of times when it talks about CMDB, right? How many times the CMDB is like, well, I need to know how many switches that has. Like, why?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't understand.
Yep. Yeah. And then there's the ones that come in and say, well, we want this application, or we want to deploy this module in ServiceNow, but we want it to look like, the old application that we had and we're replacing with.
Yeah, that happens pretty often because they're so used to working with one tool. They want to take and make ServiceNow look and like the tool that they're used to, but they're actually going away from tool onto ServiceNow for a reason. And that reason is typically because either there's technical debt. I think, Randy, you said the other day, technical debt. There's something that they've, again, like ServiceNow, they customize the heck out of it and now it's not working right, or it doesn't give functionality they want. There's some reason they're switching onto ServiceNow platform and away from whatever tool that was. And if you don't identify that, why are you switching? And look at each and everything that they need and say, okay, do you really need this? Do you want this? And that's our jobs as architects, right? Mm-hmm. Our jobs are not necessarily always easy either, because we're asking questions that people really don't want to answer. What they want is you say yes, sure, and build it, right?
I will do exactly what you want. Is what they want.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and they need to know, though, that the purpose of saying no or asking the questions, it isn't to make a judgment about whether it's a good business idea or whether it's a good business, that it's like something legitimate for the business. So when we're going back and asking questions, it's not about saying, look, you don't know how to run your business or anything like that. No, it's about figuring out, is this something that is going to fit well in the system? And are we reliably going to be able to give the results that you're actually looking for? Because a lot of times you get requests and it's like, I don't know that, like, you're saying one thing, but from what I understand about the process, the results you're looking actually is for something completely different. And so you're trying to refine that to actually make sure that before we turn the key, we really know that this is exactly what you want and this is the value you're going to get out of it for the business. And we're not doing it in such a way that we're going to constrain the business to extremely expensive maintenance, long term.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing. Yeah. I mean, you have to understand, they have to understand when you're saying to them, Why do you want this? What kind of benefit do you get out of this? Because each of those things has a cost. And I learned this really recently from my dad. My dad is building me a house right now. And I walked in the front door and Brent, you're going to kick me. And the guy that was doing the trim work, he says, come here a minute. I've got some questions for you. And he says to me, so in your closet, do you want it to go to the second level? Or do you just want it to be the one row? Or do you want it to be 2 rows? And I said, well, I think it'd be better for 2 rows. And he goes, okay, come with me. We go into the kitchen. He's like, well, on these cabinets, do you want them to go like 2 feet under or all the way to the ceiling? I'm like, all the way to the ceiling. Why not? I mean, I think it'll look better. He's like, yeah, I think it'll look better too. And I left, and a couple weeks later, my dad says to me, do you realize that you don't need to ever talk to him again?
Well,
I go, why?
That helps.
Because he just ordered $2,100 worth of sheet material. And I go, for what? He goes, because you opened your mouth. And so if you don't understand the cost, how are you going to make a logical decision? What should have happened, like everybody that comes to us with something, we should have said, I should have said, well, that, that will look great, but what does that cost? And instead I didn't. But see, that's our job. Our job to say, okay, that's what you want. Well, here's what it's going to cost to build. Because guess what? ServiceNow dev, you think everybody wants to say it's like super cheap. It's not. So you're going to have to pay for the build, and then you're going to have to pay for the maintenance forever. So what does that actually cost? And that's where we come in too, because guess what? If it costs, $400,000 to do what they want, and they're like, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. Well, there you go. Right.
Right. And it's not how tall are your ceilings? Because I don't think you could ever reach those top cabinets.
No, they're 10 foot. Yeah. I'm completely, I'll have to get a ladder to get to the second row. So don't even go there.
But along those lines, the extra cost, the extra benefit, all that kind of stuff, or the extra whatever, that's stuff that you need to make sure, okay, yes, you're telling them no, but you also need to, as an architect, you probably should be telling them no, but here's why, or we can't do it that way, but we can do it this way that should meet your needs anyways, because it's out of the box or that kind of stuff. We say no a lot, but the no's usually come with no, but we can.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. No, you don't need that 4th and 5th shelf up there because you're never going to use it.
Right.
And you can't reach it. And so unless you get a jetpack, you're not going to want to have it.
Well, that's also a good thing about, extra shelves up about 10 feet. That's looks good, but when it's like a field on a form that you'll never use.
Yeah.
That's a shelf that you'll never use or never dust or never anything. Nobody will ever use it. So what's the point of adding it? Yeah.
Yeah. So when you come to my house, when we finish this, you guys are going to laugh at me, but it is now to the ceiling anyway. But yeah, so that's the problem. So we have a couple roles, right? As architects. So the question now is, what do we want to bring to us? Like, we get a lot of ideas brought to us. What do we want?
Well, I mean, okay. I'd say I want well thought out questions, but sometimes those are the ones I've thought this out and I've designed it all for you. And this is how it has to work. And that's not going to always work for ServiceNow. Because a lot of people that are requesting this stuff aren't even IT people a lot of times, because the platform's got even bigger. And so you're getting weird things. So really what I find best when they come to me is, hey, we have this issue. We want to fix it. We need this information to fix the issue. How can you make this work in ServiceNow for us? And that kind of stuff. It's not, hey, we're coming with you, that it's exactly planned out this way and it has to be done this way.
Yeah,
I want it to look
like
this.
Need. I want to know what do you need, right? What are we trying to do here? And to be honest, I'm not sure I want them to try and design it. I want to do that in discoveries, right? I want to have those. The biggest thing that I want in the idea is, what do you need? What is it going to give you? Yep. That's the one thing I never get, is what is it going to give you? What is it going to do for you? Yeah. Is it going to save you time? Is it going to save you money?
Yeah.
What is it going to be? What's the empirical data behind it? The other thing that I like to see is how many times have you had somebody come to you with an integration and they're like, yeah, I want to integrate. And you're like, okay, that is fantastic. How many are you going to do a month? And they're like, 3.
Right. I want an automated system that will open up these tickets for me, these incidents. Well, how many times do you get these incidents? I get them maybe once every 2 years. Well, then why am I doing this?
Yeah. That's 400 hours of work. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that kind of stuff, but there's also, the thing is what I like best, I guess I should say, is to be involved with the design, not them coming to me and say, we've designed it without you. And as an architect, you should probably be involved with most of that design up front. So come to me with the business need, and we can all discover the workflow together.
And I love BAs and project managers. I really do. I think I don't know what I would do without them. My life would be absolute chaos without them. But with that being said, I find that certain ones try and solution it before they talk to me. And what I keep wanting them to do is have a conversation with me first. Like, let me be involved in the initial why and what. Mm-hmm. Let me design it and give it to you, and then you can gather the rest of the information we need. What I find happening is they talk to the customer, and between the customer and the BA and the project manager, they design it all, and then it comes to me, and what am I doing? I'm saying no. Where instead, that is a waste. That is waste. I mean, anybody who knows lean knows that rework is waste, and it basically has us do rework. And the worst part about it is I still fight those fights, but I know architects that have stopped fighting those fights. And that's where I think the risk for a lot of people is I'm okay being a jerk. I mean, but a lot of people are tired of it. They're just tired of that situation and them saying no and them redirecting and trying to redesign it. And stuff gets pushed through that could be dangerous for the system. And that's with any problem.
Well, like with ITEL says, you got to go to your SMEs to figure out what's best. Well, the project managers, those people are not the SMEs of a ServiceNow. The architect is. Sometimes it's the architect and the developer. In most cases, the architect and the developer or the admin are all the same people. So, but you go to the SME, the subject matter expert, so they can say, this is how it works and this is how we need to make it work. One of the things that I see a lot is people taking a messy workflow or process, a messy workflow from a process, and try to implement that into the tool and make the tool work with that messy workflow. That's not a good thing. If you're building a new workflow in ServiceNow for something, even if it is like incident management, don't bring your old messed up incident management into it. Just try to work through it and make it better.
Talk to your experts, right?
Yes. Yep.
I see that happen a lot where implementations get started and everybody's like at the beginning of it, they're like, yeah, we want to do this right. We want to take the time to solution everything out. And then, they start looking at what's it going to actually cost to do that. And they go, okay, well, let's just forklift what we have and dump it into this. And it's like,
and we can fix it later.
Right. Well, and you can fix it later. But the problem is you'll never
fix it.
Right.
No. Well, and it never will get fixed right because all that old code, all that old stuff that remains in there. And what they do is they'll turn it off, they'll disable it, but they'll never get it all out. It's kind of like untangling a ball of yarn. You're never gonna get it right perfectly without a tremendous amount of work. And so nobody wants to do that much work because, again, cost. They're like, well, just pull on that strand there and see what happens. Yep. And that's hard. But I find that a lot of people take that messy process and they'll start down that road, and they didn't honestly know their own process. They thought they did.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot.
They didn't know what they didn't know. So you start asking questions like, okay, so you want this integration. So what do you want it to do? And they're like, well, I want it to do what John does, right? Well, what does John do? Well, all he does is he turns that button on and off, on and off, on and off. And I go, okay, well, I can turn the button on and off. And they're like, oh, well, I forgot. He only turns that on when this happens. And this happens and he turns it off. And then, and then it's 4,000 steps later and 4,000 scenarios later. They're like, well, so we kind of have a process. And you're like, no, you never had a process to begin with. And that's, and that ends up being the messiest because you're already locked into the project. And it's so hard to backspin from that. And that's why it's really good to get solid requirements and solid stuff ahead of time and get solid processes and talk to as Brent said, your subject matter experts to make sure that things are able to fit the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Yep.
The flip side of that is a lot of times when you're sitting down and maybe it's a new process or you are starting from scratch to try to do it, people forget that there's a lot of assumed steps. Like we don't consciously go, okay, when I get up to brush my teeth in the morning, step one is I've got to roll over to the side, then set up, then put my feet on the floor, then stand up. That's just something we do. But when you're putting that into a system to automate, it has to have all the steps that get you to the sink to turn the water on. But a lot of times, the user will just say, yeah, you turn the water on, you put toothpaste on it, and then you brush your teeth. But
why do I imagine you rolling off the bed? Get up, bam! Right?
I said roll over and then put your feet down. I didn't say roll off the bed, but yeah.
Well, you forgot that step.
Before coffee, I'm not that efficient, but
Oh man!
But so you forget those things, and so when you're going back to ask people questions, it's not always like. You're not irritated. You're not saying, look, I don't think this is a good idea or anything like that. But sometimes it's like, I've got to find out what those assumed steps are that you're just not thinking about because somebody's just, somebody's doing them. And then you've also got to figure out what all the old skeletons in the closet from the old process is. Because you may have an old process where it works because there's a manual step somewhere in the way where somebody goes, okay, at 3:00 every Wednesday, I've got to reboot this server.
Right.
Right.
You have things that people don't think about.
Right. And so it's always worth it to go back and investigate, like, what is this that we're moving forward? And let's walk through what we're doing. I mean, it costs a lot because you stop and you, it is a higher upfront cost to go through that. But, in general, you gotta decide what do I want? Do I want performance and agility, and longevity in the system, or do I want to pay a ton of money for support and rework and back work later on down the road? Because either way, you're going to end up paying for it.
Yeah. Well, right. and the way I look at it is also you've got every single time you have one of these projects, you should do a lean project. I mean, it should be a full-fledged lean project because guess what? You need to put hands on, actually sit down next to the person doing the work. I mean, you have to really investigate what's the best way. Let's go ahead and if we're going ahead and doing this, let's do it right. And I guess I get frustrated because it just seems like the concern for doing it right is outweighed by the necessity of getting it done quickly.
Right. Yep. Well, we have to have this done now. Well, that's when things get messed up. You and I, when we worked in the same company together. We had a department come to us and say, "Hey, we want to do this application thing." It's the application. I'm trying to keep it so that it's kind of generic. They had an application that they give to people. They fill out this documentation. They prove that they taught classes or they did this and that, and they could submit this every quarter and get bonuses for doing certain things. But they came to us and said, well, we've been doing it on paper and this is what our process is. And now we want to automate it. Well, once we started talking to them and figuring out what all they did and did the discovery, we found out it wasn't just, hey, you fill in a piece of paper and you submit it. We look at it and give you your money. There was a lot of stuff in the background. There was the questions that there were multiple people that had to review the applications. They had a whole, process that they didn't even think about, that they were like, we just do it kind of thing. Yeah. And so, sitting down and figuring all that out. And we were able to say, okay, we're going to build this and it's going to take us this long. And they were like, cool, as long as it's automated. And that to this day, let's see, that was how long ago, Jason? Probably 6 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years?
5 or at least.
2016 or 2017.
Yeah. So we did that, and I'm still supporting that, and it's still working great and everything.
And they still are saving time and money.
Oh, there are a lot. Every time I'm doing an update to it, the VP of the department comes back and says, this is saving us so much time and paper and all this stuff. So it was a success in the long run because they were able to sit down and discuss to us and work with us to figure out what the real process was. Not, hey, just put a form out there and we'll review it and give people their money.
And that's where, and that's a great example of them thinking, this is just a form we can throw out there, right? I mean, that was the original intent. That was we could do a 10-minute form. And when we started looking at it, it's like, this is not. And it ended up being, again, a decision by Brent. Is he's looking at this and he says, listen, no, we can't do this as a form and as a requested item correctly. We need to build it as a custom application in order to do this correctly. And the architect is the one that says that's not the place to be. It needs to be over here. And that has been extremely successful because that decision was made. Right. And because those conversations were had.
Yep. Well, and they were willing to allow us to do a custom application. Granted, it was you had to pay for your custom app. So it was grandfathered in. But if they're willing to do that, they were willing to also pay for it if it was going to have to be custom. Because they understood, but they knew their workflow at that point. So now they know where to go, what's happening, where it is, that kind of stuff.
Well, and we were able to build it in such a short time compared to, say, a .NET app or, something else that was, from scratch. Because ServiceNow, that's the one wonderful thing about it is if you do have to build a custom app, it's so much faster and so much more efficient because you're building it off an existing skeleton. And that's why it makes it, so much better as a platform than so many other platforms, is because you have that skeleton to build off
of. One of the things that made that successful is also the communication between you and them. So you took the time to understand their business, and they took the time to listen to, your explanations of the processes. So I think that there's a responsibility on the architect to become a great communicator, and to learn enough about the business to know, because typically the reason why they come to you and they say, we got to have this done now, is because they are looking at one set of metrics and one set of horizon that is in a language that is completely different than IT, and then in a language that's completely different than ServiceNow architecture. And it's incumbent on the consultants or the architects to say, let's get this into a common language and make sure we're all on the same page before we add, 400 custom columns or custom, row or tables to the instance or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It was great communication because both sides of that were willing to learn about the other side and willing to have that communication. And in that process, we also discovered some inefficiencies just from the roundtable exercises. They're like, oh, this is like an extra step we don't need to be doing. And able to cut down on incorrect entries and all sorts of other benefits that came about that on the surface were not, that process, we didn't go into that process expecting to be able to save that much or to be able to find those pieces to that. But that's one of those benefits that comes from learning to be able to communicate with each other.
Right. And we also were able to help them benefit from ServiceNow because they saw how they interacted with the architect and the analyst and the person building it, all that kind of stuff. They also came back and said, hey, we have this other thing that we're doing paperwork wise. Can we work and come up with a process? And now we're tracking all the nurses certificates in ServiceNow also.
Mm-hmm.
So certifications and stuff. Yeah. So
it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing tool, and people wonder why I'm so passionate about it. And it's because of all these flexibilities, all of these uniqueness, the uniqueness of ServiceNow. It's not like any other platform out there. And that does do great things for it, but it also hinders it at times because people don't understand more than anything. They assume it's like every other application. It's a singular purpose, application, but it's not. And that was, I think, early on ServiceNow, it hindered it horribly when it was just, basic incident change, it was basic ITSM. It really kept it from breaking out into those other spheres it quickly, because everybody said that's just a ticketing tool, right? I mean, that was what I can't tell you how many times I heard that and went, oh, no, it does a lot. I mean, there's a lot that can be done with it. It's an amazing tool.
Oh yeah, it is.
But
that's where the architect comes in and says, yes, it's an amazing tool. It's a platform. We can do all this, but we need to scale it and make sure that it's going to work the correct way. And that's how the architect knows all that and needs to also be there to say yay or nay kind of thing.
Yeah. And how much?
Whoa. Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing, right? Is that the architect's responsible for. We have to know what it's going to cost you, because without that, how do you make the decision whether it's the best place for it or not? Honestly, ServiceNow, as wonderful as it is, isn't the best place for everything, right? It's not. There are other purposes, other applications that have defined purposes that may be a better fit for certain things, and that's up to us to have those communications and decide that as well. And that's, I think, a hard thing for a lot of people as well. So,
yeah, I definitely agree. On that note, let's take a short break, and then when we come back, let's talk about maybe some things that end users and requesters can do, or maybe that architects can do to help educate their end users on, kind of some of their own discovery, like figuring out for themselves what options already exist, and is there a way that we can help them make some of these predeterminations before they come to us?
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you for listening to ServiceSharp. We need to take a short break for a word from our sponsor. Welcome back. Let's continue with our topics.
All right. So we're talking about architects, and we're talking about in this next section, what can we do as architects to kind of help explain to whether it's the business people or the project managers or BAs to help them get us what we need to make those decisions, and what we can do just for the general user that wants to submit an idea. What is it you should include? I think earlier we talked about kind of the basics that we like to have, and not getting into too much specifics. Give us the idea. What do you want it to do? And what's the benefit of it? But as far as the architects, Brent, what do you do to kind of help ease that? I mean, do you do any training for, your business people, or is there anything that you think we can do to kind of help move them forward with understanding what we need?
I think one of the first things is, when somebody comes to me and they've, most of my customers lately have kind of learned, okay, we need to go to him first. But when they first started doing it, it was, we want this solution, we want it now, kind of thing. And they've learned, or I've started asking questions, and it's usually the same questions over and over. What are you trying to do? That kind of stuff. So getting them to understand that we need to know, we don't want a solution from you. We can't just implement your solution, because that's not how things work. We need to know what your business issue is, and what you need in the end, and who's going to be working with me, and do a discovery kind of thing. So it needs to be, ask a few questions up front to kind of get a general idea, and then have either a template that you send them and say, fill this out, or like an assessment document, or I like to do the like team or Zoom meetings and talk to them,
Mm-hmm.
or used to be in person, but not anymore. So that kind of stuff. So you're asking, that kind of stuff. And then as the architect, you're giving them an idea, or sometimes it's, okay, I've got your notes. Let me go think about this for 24 hours and look at some stuff up, and then I'll get back to you, kind of thing. But
yeah. I like to use the idea demand a lot. And I like to use idea because it's such a simple form. And that's where I think a lot of companies mess up, is they try and make it super complicated.
Yep.
All I want is the idea. And then I want to review that idea with the BA and say, okay, well, this is a good idea, but here's how I want it to be structured. Again, right. It goes into a demand. Once it's in a demand stage, that's when they can start gathering the information we need to make that determination. But the initial conversations, those first talks, where we start in our mind, designing it, if you would. That's very important. And if it starts with an idea. And again, that cut them off. It's one box, an idea. It right. shouldn't be. Oh well, we need to expand that out to 4,000 characters long. Just make that multi-text box stay at 256. Okay, guys. But
and it doesn't have to be just. Idea is a good place. Right. Like in an agile, because not everybody has idea or demand.
True.
In an agile, they ask 3 questions, and it's or 2 questions as a I want.
Huh? Right.
And then there's so you have the 3 questions as a HR analyst. I want a way to take in cases that our employees have, so that I can know when something's wrong, and so that I know something's wrong for them, and I can work on that. So there's the 3 questions. And at that point, you're like, okay, you want the HR service desk module. So we can do that.
Congratulations. You now have more services to pay for.
But yeah, recently my main job, we went agile, and that I know, okay, we had idea in demand before that, and they made it so complicated that nobody wanted to fill it out.
Shocker.
Businesses did. They actually had project managers fill them out for them because the project manager would come up with something. But now that we've kind of moved to an agile and we have 3 simple questions, and one of them they already know because that's their title as a VP of whatever. The other 2 questions is, I want this so that I can do this, or that my department can do this. So it makes it a lot easier, and they're willing to start at that and go through the process.
Yeah, I like that.
Keeping it simple, that makes it easier, makes your business company or your business partners out there come in and say, hey, we need your help. We know you can help us do this. And, being a hindrance is not a good thing. Telling them no, yes, you're going to have to do that every once in a while. And that's not being a hindrance. That's just saying, no, there's a better way of doing this.
Right. Well, if you're saying no all the time as an architect, if that's all you're doing when they come to you, they will go around you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't say no all the time. I've said no quite a bit, but a lot of times it's why, yes, we can do that, but there's a better way that we can do it this way.
But you'll get those that you're just like, okay, so we can't do it that way. We're not that's not stable. That's not secure for the system.
Yep.
And what about this? And they're like, no. And they're like, okay, but here's the options. We can do it right. We can make it stable, or we cannot do it. I mean, there is a point to where you have to say no. Now, it should be after you've gone down every avenue to say yes. But a good example is, the company has multi-factor authentication, and you go through the laundry list of potential ways you can do it, and they're like, no, we want to give everybody a local account. Well, why do we have multi-factor? And the security is like, hair catches on fire.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we can't do that. And then yours going, no, we can't do that. But what about if we, what about if we go around them a different way? What if we do it this way? And if they just are resistant and don't want to do it any other way, there are times you just have to put your foot down and say, no, not here. Not now.
There might be certain times, but 90% of the time there is a solution, and you're not telling them no because whatever. And usually I don't it depends on who it is. Sometimes I do say no just to give them a hard time, but that's just me, and they know that.
Yeah.
But usually it's not giving them a no as an architect. You're supposed to give them solutions.
But that's when you pick up the phone, right? Just like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's what we're kind of talking about is it's important to build relationships with these teams, because like you said, Jason, sometimes there are going to be times where you're going to have to say this absolutely will not work. But in order for them to accept that and not do an end run around you, they have to trust you. And that's what Glenn is saying, that 90% of the time there's a way to do a win-win. And if as annoying as it might be sometimes to keep working toward that, because some customers are hard to work with. But it's very, very rewarding once you build that relationship. And it doesn't have to be a relationship where it's like, I want to hang out with them on the weekend or anything like that. It's just I respect that they know what they're doing and that they're trying to get us the solutions that we need, rather than being seen as, because, a lot of times, like in information security, they just got the reputation of, no, we would do that, but security won't let us. So we're just going to write our password down here and leave it on the boardroom table. And if you happen to pick it up, then you can go ahead and take care of that, because we got to get this done.
Yeah.
Security groups kind of figured out we've got to become partners with, if we want them to be secure, because they've got to understand, that it's not about us saying no and a power trip. It's about us having a common interest in everything like that. And that's really where the architecture kind of, comes in. You earn the right to be able to put your foot down if you build a relationship with them.
Yes.
Yeah. You have to build political capital. And I know that's a horrible way to say it, but you really do. You build that capital over time. So, you hope that the first project with that person isn't one of those. Sometimes you just hope it's one of the other ones. But
once you start building a relationship with them, and like Randy said, it's not, hey, I'm going to go hang out with this guy on the weekend kind of relationship. It's more of a, I trust them to come to me. They trust me to come up with the best solution or have their back when it comes to certain things, that kind of stuff. You just got to have that relationship talking back and forth about what they need and what you think the system can do for them, that kind of stuff. And we just did an HR deployment. And I think part of the issue, or part of being able to do that successfully, was that they were hesitant to bring us in because they were going to have their consultant group come in and do it. But because of the COVID thing hitting and all, we were able to quick paste some stuff for them and get stuff in ServiceNow that they needed. And they worked with us on that. And they were like, hey, these people do know what they're talking about, and they would be great to help with us. So just helping somebody with a little form that they needed and got it out for them quickly and everything, built a relationship that they came to me and my team at that time, at the time that they were talking about even bringing in the consultant to do it. And they were like, okay, here's what we want to do, that kind of stuff. So they started involving us because they had more confidence in us because we were willing to work with them and talk to them and treat them like adults, not like, stupid people that don't know anything about IT.
Yeah.
Which they're not, but that's how some people. But that's how some people in IT treat people, and that's also how some people outside of IT think, oh well, they're just big brain IT people, and they don't even want to talk to me. So
yeah, and that's the other thing. The architect kind of has to be both. He has to be understanding of the IT infrastructure, and he has to be understanding of the platform, and he also has to understand the business side and be able to communicate effectively. That's kind of a strange bedfellows, and so that's where we are as architect. We have to kind of be those in betweens, communicating back and forth with for example, the dev guys that really can't communicate, and the business side where they communicate well, but they communicate differently than the dev guys. And the dev guys can communicate, but they're using terminology and they're using acronyms and really will confuse the business side. So we have to understand both languages and basically work as an interpreter in the middle of it, as well as the other jobs that we have.
Yep. Yeah. And I didn't realize how much IT uses acronyms until I started working with other departments, and they're like, what does that mean? Yeah. I had someone ask me what snow was today. And I was like, oh, well, that's what some people call ServiceNow.
Oh, by the way,
supposed to, but they should. No, they do.
It's a competing platform, got people.
Anyway. I told them that too. I said it's a competitor, so they shouldn't be calling it that. But
that's a legitimate question when you live in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
We'll find out here in a couple of days. But
no kidding. It was 70 degrees today.
Yeah,
it was beautiful.
It be 0 in 3 days.
Yep.
Yeah, and ice storm.
Yeah. One of the what you talk about, Jason and Brent, about how you have to kind of live in both worlds. The great thing about it is people will teach you their language.
Yes.
If you just ask.
Yep.
Yes.
If you sincerely say, I want to understand what you're doing, and you listen to them, they'll teach you exactly what you need to know in order to be able to translate between the two worlds.
Yep. Yeah. And if you listen to them and learn from them, they're willing to learn from you what you mean by, well, no, that's not going to work because of this table or whatever. They're willing to learn your language. So
yeah. I find it also in
reality, if you're being run around and you're not getting invited to the meetings like Brent was talking about, where they would invite them to the consulting group meetings and things like that, you need to do a hard look and examine whether you've built any relationships with those groups or not. Because if people are doing an end run around you, maybe it's because you're always an obstacle rather than a solution provider.
Yeah, and they will every time.
Yeah, and I can say you can't have a relationship with all of your customers. That's kind of hard. But there are the same customers that come to you all the time, or that probably will be coming to you all the time. Those are the ones that you start, communicating with and associating with. And then when they have coworkers that they work with that need things, they'll say, oh, well, you need to go talk to Brent. He's really knowledgeable. He'll listen to you. He'll explain it all to you, that kind of stuff. So it's nice to be able to, just start sharing that. But you can't just be nice to one person.
Yeah. I think the number one mistake, though, that the worst mistake an architect can make, and probably the worst mistake I've seen an architect make on a consistent basis, is not knowing, but not saying they don't know. Like it's amazing how the ego gets involved. There are times that we don't know, where we have to get back with people. I mean, we're not all knowing. We know the platform very well.
ServiceNow changes every day, so
that's right. I mean, you want to try, and you try and stay on top of that stuff, but the reality is we don't know everything. And if you come across that you feel like you know everything, then that's not a good place to be. That's not a good communication strategy. I will get back with you is absolutely okay.
That's an acceptable answer. Yes,
it is. It's an acceptable answer.
Can you go over that one more time? Because the second biggest mistake I see is assuming that when you say SME, you're meaning subject matter expert, and not something completely different.
Right. That's exactly. Whenever I said SME or SME earlier, I was thinking, okay, I know what that means, so I better explain out loud what that is, just in case somebody else didn't. That's why I later on said, subject matter expert, because not everybody's going to know what that is. Not everybody's going to know it. Yeah. It's what I work with several ITEL experts, and they just assume everybody knows what they're talking about. And they're always blah, 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 this and everything. And it's like, these people don't know ITEL. You went to a lot of training. They didn't. So you have to, in some cases, not talk to them like a 2-year-old, but kind of, talk their language and tell them, yeah, this is how it works.
And
you have to be willing to educate people in a way that doesn't make them feel looked down upon, if you want them to understand what you're saying and to use that terminology. Otherwise, you need to learn their language. You either need to be willing to teach your language, or you need to learn their language. Both. Yeah,
I was going to say both is probably the more accurate, because that project I was talking about earlier, there were I don't know that we could have gotten them to understand everything we were talking about, but Jason and I sat down with them and with one other person, and was able to discuss with them and learn their language of, what this was, because they were coming back with standards and activities and all this stuff. And you're like, well, that's not what we consider a standard or an activity. And so learning their language is, you got to have the patience to do that.
Yeah, you really do. Yeah. And it's funny because I remember that project very well, and it was a lot of fun. If you are the kind of person that I am, and you just enjoy learning stuff about other parts of the business, and that will come in handy. I will say, I remember when I first got into IT, and this is really where I started understanding the language issue, was I went to work for Randy. And I would sit in meetings and just write down acronyms over and over. And then I'd get back to my desk and I'd Google them all, because I didn't know what the heck they were. And so I would just kind of like, yeah. And I would just write all that down. I remember at the time, I didn't know the difference between JavaScript and Java. And, anyway.
See, I was born in IT, so I just...
Well, yeah, Brent started when he was 3.
Close, but...
Well, that's one of the things that we frequently forget, is we've been in IT forever.
Yep.
And and it's something like we do every single day. But you got to imagine, like, if you were to walk into, like if you've never tried to do crown molding before, that's a wake up call.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh
You know
yeah.
I mean?
Seriously.
I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's not as easy as it looks.
My wife's
No, it isn't.
My wife's in accounting. I don't know that I could understand. I have a hard time balancing a checkbook. So
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. I mean, I tell people ask me why I got an accounting degree because I was IT. I said, well, my wife's an accountant. I wanted to be able to talk to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I forget.
Yeah.
See, I have two sons, and they're into computers. So the three of us will start talking about certain things, and my wife will just have this glazed look over her eyes, and it's like,
Right.
oh yeah. So that makes me think. Okay, yeah, I got to remember these people.
You got to remember your
always
audience
know
for
that.
sure.
Yep.
And it's intimidating, but it's also I'll start talking about my work to my father, and he'll look at me and says, "Listen, I'm about to go to sleep, and I need you to stop."
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. Let me, but it's we got to know our audience. And with my dad, if you stop using those terms and you spell it out, they understand, and their eyes don't roll to the back of their head, and they don't go to sleep, because otherwise they don't understand. So that's, effective communication is like the pinnacle of one of the things that you have to have as a good architect. Because if you don't, you will fail.
It's really essential everywhere. It's an underrated skill. People do not rate the ability to communicate effectively high enough in the skills to be sought after. But I'll tell you one thing that you can do at the beginning of every meeting with clients or with customers or business associates and stuff like that is just say, hey, my goal is to meet your needs here and to exceed your expectations. And as part of that, I want to make sure I'm as clear as possible. So I want you to know that anytime you don't understand what I'm saying, feel free to ask a question.
Yeah.
Just lay that out. And then also, if you feel like I don't understand what you're saying, feel free to point that out so we can get on the same page and not assume that we're on the same page.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just give them permission up front to so that they don't feel, something I could have done to make your life better is to just say, hey, I know you're new in the IT world, so I should have said that in those meetings. Feel free to ask questions.
Well, and the thing is, for somebody that's never been around IT at the time, it is intimidating. And to be honest, it's when you're trying to learn it, it's not that you don't have the capability or you literally are just ignorant. You have no idea what these things mean. And Google, if you're new to IT, if you're new to ServiceNow, I will encourage you to write those things, do what I did in that way, because don't be intimidated by it. But there's a lot of times in these meetings, you can't stop and say, so what does IT mean? So sometimes you got to just write it down, Google it, because it's okay to not know, as long as you're willing to learn. It's okay not to know,
right.
But learn it. And the next time you go in that meeting, you're like, yeah, I know what IT means.
And that's the same for you as the architect, or you as the analyst, or the developer, or whatever.
Yeah.
If you don't understand what they're talking about, you got to ask them too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. If you have no idea what a bill of lading is, or no idea what turnover ratio means, or something like that, when you're talking to supply chain or accounting, ask them, what does that do? What is that? Why do you need to know that?
Yeah.
Don't guess. You're gonna be wrong.
Yeah.
You might be right, but you might not be right in the context of what they're using it for.
Exactly.
You might be able to find a textbook answer, but you find out that just like we all have colloquialisms, which pretty sure I didn't pronounce that right, but we all have those things where it's like, when you're from the South and you say soda, you mean, Dr. Pepper or something like that. But when you, other places say cola or something, you know what I mean? It's like, you may have the exact same terminology, but mean completely different things. And so it's always good to just ask for clarification. Sometimes it seems like it's silly, but it's better to ask for clarification than, build a DeLorean when they wanted a Honda.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then somebody told them, several $100,000 worth of oops.
And I want something to be very clear. I keep hearing people say, I don't need an architect. All I need is a developer and a project manager. And I understand there's a cost, and that cost sometimes is very high. But you need to understand that the reality behind it is that developer is going to do whatever he's told to do. And there is a different mindset between a developer and an architect. The developer, his mindset is do whatever it takes to get it done. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the best for the system. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing. It doesn't necessarily mean the process is correct. It doesn't necessarily mean it fits in ServiceNow. The developer mindset is get it done. And that's great because that's what their mindset needs to be. And if you only have a developer and a project manager, what you're going to have is a system that's unstable and unsupportable in 10 years from now. Because you don't have anybody that puts the brakes on or analyzes how it's done right. You need an architect. And I can't tell you how many times I'm going to stress this or how important this is. You have to have somebody that is on that architect level. If you have a serious platform, if you have a small company, 3 people, and you can't afford an architect or can't afford an architect, or you can't afford all 3 or whatever, get somebody that has that architect skill, and you will be better off without a project manager, for example. You need that skill set. You need that knowledge of the system, that knowledge of how to keep it stable, because otherwise you really will get way off and you're going to be calling in a group of people to come fix your stuff, and it's going to cost you a tremendous amount of money long term. And to kind of give you an example of what I've seen happen in other organizations, they've hated the platform, but what they didn't understand is what they hated wasn't the platform. It was all the stupid customizations that were done over years and years that made it slow, that made it cumbersome, that made it ridiculous in so many ways. And then I've seen multiple companies get rid of ServiceNow and go with a different platform that did less, that was not as good, and cost just as much because they didn't understand what they had was crap because of what they did to it, not because of the system itself.
Right.
And you can always augment with contract experts as well. And you don't necessarily have to have an architect for every decision, but you better have a good plan for other people to follow. If you don't have the right people for the right job, I'll tell you, we decided we were remodeling a house. We decided we were going to put in a hot, not a hot tub, but a jacuzzi bathtub. We just had a standalone shower before. So we hired some people to knock some walls out and everything like that. Well, we needed an outlet to plug the motor into. We didn't have an electrician on the job. We had plumbers on the job. Well, plumbers saw on the other side of the wall was an outlet. So we'll just punch a hole through the wall and push the cord through.
Oh, wow.
And that sounds stupid. And I walked through and I saw it and I'm like, wow, this is not going to pass inspection. But how many times have we seen that exact scenario play out inside ServiceNow with customers?
Oh,
yep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Someone punched a hole in the wall and plugged it in, but it wasn't.
They just did what they could to make it work and not thought quickly and not thought it out. Right. And, you're right, Jason. It'd be great to have all those in one department or in different people, but sometimes you can't. But what you got to do is have someone that has at least the mindset of an architect that says, wait, that's not the best thing to do for the company or for our application.
Yeah. So the problem is what I see is you have, and I'm talking large customers here.
Yeah.
I'm talking about they're spending millions of dollars for the platform. They're a large company, and they say, well, we have 2 people. They're running the app, running it. We have a developer. And I'm not talking about small companies. Small companies, you're going to have to get creative because of the finance issue. You're going to have to find somebody that has those architect skills that we talked about today. You've got to find somebody that is a developer that has that potential to have that mindset shift to an architect. Mm-hmm. Architects need to be technical. We need to know how to do stuff. We generally come from developers, but you need somebody. If you don't have the money to get a full-time architect, you need to have somebody that has that mindset, like Brent said. But listen to this podcast. I mean, we laid it out. This is the way they need to think. Go to your interviews with these questions, that mindset of this is what I'm looking for. But if you're a big company, there is no reason you shouldn't have at least development and architecture. There's just no reason why you shouldn't have both.
Well, the major reason usually is the company does not believe in it or doesn't feel like that it will be a financial benefit by having people on staff.
Absolutely. So, and hire somebody, hire it out, whatever. But the reality is if it just, maybe you're right. Maybe they need to be shown what can be done.
I can tell you, if you have all 3, that you can do, the project management, the architect, the development kind of stuff, the admin, day-to-day admin. If you can do all that, there are a lot of companies out there that would love to have you.
Yeah. I mean, really is
a very worthwhile skill set to develop.
Yeah, for sure.
You just have to be willing to leave, and I'm not. So,
well, I mean, you're 12 days from retirement. I mean, you've been
I'm not that
like
old,
I said,
Jason.
like I said, you started when you were 3, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you are definitely have always been my mentor, but of course we're the same age, so I can't really,
Not really. I'm a year older than you, but yeah.
Oh well, I'm sorry. When you're our age, a year is not really much. Yeah.
Right,
okay, now I sound like I'm 400 years old.
Man, I feel like the young guy in the room. I don't know if I.
You are.
You are.
I'm not talking about how old I am. Well, we could probably just talk about this for a while, but let's save some for the next podcast, I guess.
That's it, guys. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining. We appreciate you listening to us blabber on, if you would. But remember, you can always get a hold of us. We do need suggestions. We'd love to have to hear your suggestions of what topics that we should cover. And there are multiple ways to get a hold of us. So please get a hold of us. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Absolutely. And if you don't have someone that you can ask questions, like Jason was talking about earlier in the show about, writing the acronyms down and going and ask somebody, shoot them our way. We love to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Have a great one, everyone.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
We want to thank our flagship sponsor for this show, the Sharpstone Group, LLC. Sharpstone is your source for all of your ServiceNow needs. Implementation, development, administration, strategy, and architecture. Contact the Sharpstone Group today at info@sharpstonegroup.com or 405-594-0100. We'd love to answer your questions or have you on the show. Contact us at ServiceSharp@sharpstonegroup.com or find our LinkedIn info in the notes. Additional sponsorship opportunities are available.